Hey, Dave Sandy here with this week's BuzzBite Report overview for the Upper Midwest at anglingbuzz.com. Well, our summer patterns are definitely in full swing right now. We're getting close to the maximum water temperatures of the year. Lots and lots of bait fish out there and a lot of selective feeding times for a lot of different fish species. And so it helps to know the basic patterns where you can get in and get on some of the major fish around the Upper Midwest. And so what I thought I'd do today is go through some of the basic patterns. One thing I will mention up front is that we are still experiencing very high water in a lot of places. Our rivers are high, often blown out. A lot of lakes are high, and so that has maybe affected our patterns a little bit. Now I'll start with largemouth bass, and while this is a diverse time of year where we can fish topwaters over weed tops or buzzbaits, we can fish jigworms down the sides of deep weeds, there is a tendency right now for people to fish a little bit shallower than usual due to the high water, and so you might be throwing weedless frogs or spinner baits or twitching soft baits up on inside weed lines, flooded shoreline cover, fishing a little shallower than usual. Smallmouth bass right now in a lot of our lakes are distributed out to rocky reefs, rocky points, and structure breaking into the main basin. And you can fish a little deeper for them. But in general, again, because of the high water, we've got some good shoreline patterns in places. Certainly the topwater bite has been very good in a lot of the reports that we've heard. Walleyes, again, being a very versatile species and stocked in a lot of different places. I like to say there's no such thing as just typical walleye behavior anymore, but here's a couple things to look for. Right now, a lot of walleyes are distributed at all depth levels, and we've been going through a good live bait rigging bite in a lot of places, leeches, crawlers, down the edges of structures, down toward the thermocline. We may, in some lakes like Mille Lacs, be starting to experience a good open water trolling bite with lead core and crankbaits out over the basin. Okay, but in a lot of other places, we will start to see oxygen starting to get thin down there in the deep water, and there will be a movement of walleyes up into weed beds for the month of August. And so don't discount fishing with things like rip and wraps or jigs and soft plastics, working weed edges. It all depends on the local behavior and how fish adapt. Now, northern pike for the month of August, the biggest northerns tend to be pretty scarce early in the month because a lot of them in lakes that have big fish and have Cisco-type forage, the pike will actually go quite deep. And I know when we like to go up to Rainy Lake and fish this time of year, we'll be using jigs and big soft baits, 5-inch soft baits, down in 40 feet of water and catching big northern pike. Now, by the end of the month, as the water starts to cool back below 70, we'll start to see those big pike penetrate weed beds again, and then it'll be a great time to be trolling big spinner baits or casting musky-sized baits. But for now, the big pike are going to be scarce unless you go down deep and look for them. Muskies, on the other hand, are not pike, and they're not stressed by the warm water, and so muskies are in full swing right now, and it depends on your local waters, whether they're using timber in a flowage, where they could be on rock piles, they could be on weeds. Basically, when you go to a musky lake, you have to check a lot of these different patterns and see what the predominant fishing location could be. In others, like Lake St. Clair in Michigan, you've got a predominantly open water trolling bite where people are trolling spoons, spinners, or crankbaits out there at high speeds, catching multiple fish per day. Okay, crappies, definitely low light bites at morning and evening or at night. Fishing on the edges of cover like weed beds or timber. Biggest bluegills right now are tending to be absent in a lot of places, and that's because they're not where people are fishing for them. In many of our natural lakes, the biggest bluegills go relatively deep this time of year, and it's a great time to be drop shotting in like 18 to 25 feet of water within about a foot or so of the bottom. They're not necessarily up in the real shallow weeds. We've got our trout and salmon bites. Again, with a lot of the rivers blown out, a lot of river fishing can be difficult for either smallmouth bass or for trout. If anything, I would say for trout, use a little bit bigger streamer flies, more colorful flies that the fish can see a little better. For smallmouth bass, which are typically in mid-river areas on like gravel shoals and things, look more this year for more shoreline cover. Flooded trees, flooded woods, stuff like that. Throw spinner baits up on there. soft plastic twitch baits. Get up more into the cover. Now, as far as the Great Lakes trout and salmon, that can really vary, where you're starting to get some runs up into the rivers. Again, the rivers are high, they're going to be muddy. Rather than fly fishing, you might be looking more in terms of a spinner or a crankbait presentation. And out in the big water, boy, that really depends on the local preferences. You go to the Wisconsin side of Lake Michigan, everybody talks about flashers and flies. You go over to the eastern side, over the Michigan shoreline, and people are talking about trolling spoons. Depth preferences really vary as far as whether you're going to lake trout or Chinook salmon or cohos. And with the wind, boy, things can really change on a day-to-day basis depending on the location and the depth of that cold water. So that's something you really need to stay on top of. And one thing I like to say is that there's a lot of information out there for versatile anglers can adapt to what the fish are doing, and you can easily go out and decipher patterns on your own, but you want to quick step the process a little bit. I would say go out here to the site, go to our state-by-state guide and see what our buzzbite reporters in the field have to say. They'll clue you in on a lot of local patterns and help you get on fish quicker and hopefully catch some bigger fish in the process in the weeks ahead.